Hey everybody, Basilray from VapeTV.com. Today we're jumping straight into things to try and keep this video at a reasonable length. There's a lot to cover. So before you are going to be looking at the Steam Machine, which is a rebuildable atomizer that comes to us from Greece. So there's a couple of different ways that we can run the Steam Machine, or different modes, I guess you could call them. We're going to focus most of our time on the upgraded VST mode, which stands for Variable Steam Temperature. But there is also a dripping mode, and that's what this sleeve is for. So we'll quickly look at that towards the end of the up-close portion. So there's four main components that make up the Steam Machine with the VST add-on. We've got a drip tip, which is certainly an optional purchase. You don't have to buy this fancy stainless steel drip tip. It matches everything perfectly. It's nice and contoured, shined up to a mirror finish. I really do like it. It's a great drip tip. I've used it on some other things outside of the Steam Machine, and it's a fantastic drip tip. So that leaves us kind of with three pieces. So we have this. This is our tank body. I'm going to set this aside as well for right now. And we've got two pieces which are threaded together here. So this is the sleeve and the base. So let's unscrew the sleeve and see what's going on under here. Unscrewing. Come on, lots of threads to go through. There we go. And when I pull off the sleeve, you notice, first of all, this long loopy wick. We'll touch back around on what that's for. But let's just look at how airflow and how the device is going to connect, all that good stuff. So this is designed to be used with an Ego battery or a 510 to Ego cone adapter. If you look, I've got just a long 510 adapter here. When I put this in, I mean, it wiggles all around. It's not going to catch. There's nothing for it to thread on. And if you look, you can see there's no threads around the center post there. But if we grab a 510 to Ego cone adapter, this is going to thread up in here. If I can steady my hands enough, there we go. This is going to thread up here and make our connection nice and flush. Right, so now we can slap it on any 510 atomizer we want, and we are ready to roll. So because of that kind of, aesthetic design kind of choice or connection choice, we're going to have two air intake holes, one on each side of the base. They're kind of small holes, but they give you the perfect amount of air, I think, to give you kind of a medium stiff draw, not concrete through a straw, right? Not like a really thick milkshake, but certainly not like sucking through an open straw. So on one side you're going to have the Steam Machine logo. It's a little engraved locomotive insignia, and on the other side you're going to have a serial number. So this is number 0493. So I'm going to cover off building the coil in a separate video just to keep the actual review and look at how it all fits together to a shorter time period, because we don't want this to drag on forever and ever. So that's going to be a completely separate video. But quickly, what we have is a ceramic cup that has some holes in it. One hole is for one end of the coil to run out the bottom, and that's pressure fit across the bottom of the ceramic. Then the other side runs just down the side here. So here you can see my non-resistance wire, and that's going to get caught up in this collar, which is going to help snug all this up and hold it in place. If I kind of pull on this, you can see, I mean, it's pressure fit in there pretty well. It's not going to go anywhere, but it is pressure fit. So the next question is, why do I have this long, silly-looking loopy wick on one side and not on the other? This is important to allow the Steam Machine to run in VST format or setup or mode. So VST, standing for Variable Steam Temperature, is achieved due to something happening in the tank portion. So before we get too far, we're going to go ahead and put our sleeve back on. You want to make sure when you first assemble this that you get your wick good and primed. Again, we'll have a completely separate video for looking at how to build all this, but it is important that your wick is primed. You can see mine is dark brown, or kind of a golden brown at this point. So notice I'm going to stick this long loopy end up the tube. That's where we want it. We want it as close to where the mouthpiece is going to go as we can get it. And if I could get this lined up just right, there we go. Whoop, maybe not. That's better. We're going to screw the sleeve on, That's going to give you an idea of just how long this wick really is. There we go. So now if you notice and you look here, you can kind of see the wick inside. You can see down to the coil. And if I kind of hold it at this angle here, you want the wick just long enough that you can kind of pull it and stretch it, and it'll extend past the top of the sleeve. So that is the sleeve and the base and the wick setup for VST mode. Now let's look at this tank kind of body. This is the actual big upgraded portion to the VST that differentiates it from the standard steam machine. So, disclaimer, this actually uses polyfill. If you are morally opposed to polyfill, you don't want to have to fiddle or fuss. It drove you over the edge. If you've been vaping for a long time, you remember back to the days of Fluval and straw mods and all this junk. This may just, from a philosophical standpoint, turn you off entirely. I will tell you this performs pretty well. Let's take a look at what's going on. So in this portion here, we have this filled with polyfill. You want more polyfill if you're using a PG juice, less polyfill if you're using a very thick VG juice. So the polyfill is going to hold the liquid, and when we set this in, it's going to physically make contact. Whoops, that's a little high up there. That's better. So when we push this in, you can see my wick is sticking out the end here. The wick is going to make direct contact with the polyfill, and in the direction of gravity, which is down as we're vaping, juice needs to flow from the filler through the wick down to the coil. Okay? When we inhale, the air intake is going to come through this little cone here. So if you look, you can see straight through. This is where your vapor and air are going to come into the mouthpiece. So your drip tip is going to fit in the end of the tank body. Okay? And vapor is going to travel up through here, not through the filler, through this center tube. This center tube is really what gives it the VST nomenclature. You can screw this in, okay, or you can unscrew it and pull it out. Based on where you have this set is going to determine the relative temperature that you feel when you vape. So it sounds a little bit gimmicky, but when we think about it, by pulling this back or screwing it in, we're effectively pulling the tube where our vapor is coming farther away from the actual coil. When we unscrew it and push it out, we're going to put this closer to the coil where our vapor is happening. So by doing that, you remove some of the distance the vapor has to travel before it gets here, giving you a more direct path, which is going to make the vapor feel a bit warmer, because it should, theoretically, be a bit warmer. So when we slap all of this together, we have the fully assembled steam machine VST, and it's ready to vape, especially if I get my towel out of it here. There we go. And now it is ready to go, ready to vape. I could slap this directly on an Ego battery if I felt that was the way I wanted to rock and roll. Or I could use this 510 to Ego cone adapter, which you would have to have on hand or purchase separately to make this go. Now, there is another mode that is available, and that's drip mode. It's not nearly as fancy, so it utilizes the exact same base piece, coil setup, and you can kind of trim the wicks a bit more if you like. This would thread on instead of this sleeve, and a drip tip, let me just grab a cheap, this is just a cheap junky stainless steel drip tip, would just fit in here, and it would just simply function as a dripping atomizer. So this is kind of the VST and the steam machine, all said and done. These requires a couple different things to get us to this mode. We'll talk about that, pricing, and performance when we go back up top and you can stare at my ugly face. So we're back up top. I have the steam machine VST currently threaded with that Ego adapter, 510 to Ego cone adapter on my Pro Vari. 1.8 ohm coil set in at 4.4 volts. So that's not a crazy out-of-line wattage combination. 1.8 ohms at 4.4 volts. That's pretty standard. This feels a little bit warmer due to this VST module. It sounds incredibly gimmicky. And that was the first thing I thought when I heard about it and looked at how it works. it actually does work. So if I take this and just screw this piece in farther, set it all back up, just drop it back on. I notice a drop in the temperature. I can physically notice that. It's noticeable how much warmer it feels when you thread this out. So not only can you set it at an optimal voltage for how it's going to wick with your liquid and your coil resistance and all those things, you can actually adjust the final temperature a bit by unscrewing that cone in the tank body, in the VST portion, and getting your air intake, right, your vapor, the direction your vapor is coming, closer to the heating source. So kind of like the difference between a 510 and a 306. That's a lot of what makes the 306 so much warmer, especially if you use a little shorty 306 drip tip. You're putting your direct suction, your inhale, closer to the heating coil. So even at the same wattage, that's one of the reasons, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons a 306 atomizer feels warmer. By the same token, when we lower that cone, we're putting our vapor source closer to where we're inhaling it through. So it gets noticeably warmer. The other thing that I think is great about this, it's pretty much a perfect pairing for an Ego Twist battery, with one exception, not the 1000 milliamp hour Ego Twist battery, because I think it just gets to be a little long and unwieldy. So if you're going for a very Dawn to Boom vape kind of fancy pants look, you can get that out of this. So this is just too long, I think, for everyday out and about. I think it works better on maybe an Ego T battery, or one of the smaller capacity Ego Twist batteries, just from a portability standpoint. So this is a bit, almost an inch and a half, probably shorter. So it just makes it a little bit more concealable, not so ridiculous looking. Now let's talk about the wicking here. Surprisingly, this wicks very well. I was very skeptical about how this was going to wick and work as well. Just thinking about, right? So just thinking about this from a physical standpoint, you're talking going back to polyfill, using a wick to pull from polyfill. Sounds very unappealing. I mean, I think it really does, but it works well. And I think part of that is that we're looking at an atomizer setup here that is working in the direction of gravity. Juice is going to flow down the wick. We're not fighting up against it and trying to create some sort of straw vacuum. Juice is going to flow down the wick to the coil. So it produces a nice amount of very flavorful vapor. And that I really like about this. I mean, it performs very, very well. It's easy to set up. There's a few different options. If I want to, I could easily use this as just a dripping atomizer for day-to-day use. So from that standpoint, I really like the VST. Let's talk about pricing. So I mentioned this is available from Greece. That's where it comes from. There's a few different things you would need here. So the base package includes the steam machine, and you get a meter of wire, a meter of non-resistance wire, and some wick and some spare filler. So if you want to get to the VST, you would need to get the full package. The full VST setup is 82 euros, which is going to be just over, I think, $100 if my conversion's right, and about 8 euros for shipping. That would not include the drip tip. So the drip tip is a separate purchase, and that's going to run us, for this fancy drip tip, come on site, load. There we go. The drip tip is just under 10 euros, and you'd get that probably included with the shipping cost. So it is a little bit expensive. It's on the higher price side. But if you're someone who is in love with the Ego Twist battery, This is a perfect rebuildable for you to slap directly on that. Doesn't require any modification of the battery or anything. It gives you a nice, clean, polished look here. So let me thread this together, and I mean, it just looks like it's made for an Ego battery. It really is. So, big thanks to my Greek friend who shall remain nameless so he doesn't get spammed over on ECF, who sent this to me to check out. I really like this. I would certainly buy this if the budget allowed for it and I didn't already have one. I would absolutely have one of these on hand. I think it's a perfect marriage for an Ego battery. That VST module gives you some options, so you could get by with, you know, running it at a lower ohm coil, right, lower resistance coil, and you can simulate and get a little more heat, or the feeling of more heat, more temperature, higher wattage out of the vape. Vape's great, wicks well, 2 mil capacity, very easy to top off. Simply pop this off, take your bottle, drip, fill it up. You know, the wick and wire is incredibly cheap. The filler would be incredibly cheap. So this is just I think spending a little more upfront gets you a very economical vape. Certainly this is not going to be for everybody. I can already hear the Vapors Forum crowd screaming, but it uses polyfill. Sorry guys, I do like this. I would buy this. I may send this to another reviewer friend to just take a look at and see what he thinks. But ringing endorsement here, really like it, machined very well. Everything fits together very precisely, very clean, nice atomizer. One of the better, I think, rebuildables that is not a Genesis, because to be perfectly honest, I haven't been a huge fan of anything Genesis that I've really tried. So that's what I've got. This video is way too long. Like I said, that's why I'm going to put out a second video on the VST, just showing you how to build the coil for this. I'll try and get that out in the next few days. But until then, you can SMS or text me if you're a layman and you prefer the term text message me, 612-293-6405. Of course, you're always welcome to PM me on any of the major forums, New Vapor, where you can find all my videos neatly categorized in my own sub-forum, ECF or Vapors Forum, and Twitter, Facebook, Vape TV Live Monday nights. There's all sorts of ways to get a hold of me. So until you do that and we see each other again, please take care.